Hello, Erica here today, and today I have some recommendations for fantasy books for people who are lovers of literary fiction. So, the fantasy genre can be a bit daunting. It can be a bit hard to get into, I find. There's a lot out there. There's like huge cult followings for some books and authors, and there are huge series and things like that. But I'm going to recommend a few books that I feel like are a really good place to start if you read a lot of literary fiction or classics and you're looking for a fantasy read. The first book I'm going to recommend is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is the first book in the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I haven't read the rest of the series yet, but I heard that it's great. This is oftentimes recommended for people as a good place to start with fantasy because it's very beautifully written, like really beautiful, and it focuses a lot on character development rather than being very action driven, as a lot of fantasy books are. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like a good, chewy, action packed, adventure packed fantasy book, but I find that that can be a little jarring if you're used to reading kind of slower stories focused more on character rather than plot. So I highly recommend this. This is the story of Quoth. I think it's Quoth. And his rise, basically, as he learns magic and goes to this school, and it's a whole, like, kind of coming-of-age deal. I don't want to spoil it or talk too much about the plot, because I'm really bad at talking about the plots of things, but I definitely highly recommend this. I will personally be picking up the second book very soon, and it's a good place to get started. Next, I have two books by Neil Gaiman. I think that Neil Gaiman is an awesome place to get started if you're looking to get into the fantasy genre. He kind of blends more literary fiction elements with kind of urban fantasy and classic fantasy elements, as well as some like fairy tale and mythological elements. He does it all. The first one I have is Stardust. This is absolutely fantastic. I only recently read it, but it's a really amazing story about a boy, Tristan, who goes to Fairy to retrieve a star. That's all I'm going to say. I thought that this was really lovely. Again, some really awesome characters, some really interesting plot lines. This one's a little bit more action-packed than The Name of the Wind is, but I just thought it was really beautifully done, and I really liked the world building in it, so I would highly recommend this as well. The next book by Neil Gaiman I have to recommend is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. This is a really interesting, really dark story, and unfortunately I don't have my copy with me because I lent it out. But it's hard to talk about the plot of this book. It's really hard, especially for me, but I don't want to give anything away about this book. You just have to dive into this book head first. It would be a great read for October. I've been trying to kind of incorporate some darker reads into my recommendations for this month. It would be a really good one for that because it is really creepy. I read it in one sitting. It's a very short book, and it's really fantastic. So definitely get your hands on that if you're interested. The next one I have may come as no surprise. That's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I love this book. And this book is huge. This book is like 1,000 pages long. Okay, it's like 840 pages long. Anyway, this is a fantasy book that is about two magicians in England who are trying to bring magic back. It's set in a world where magic once existed, but nobody practices magic anymore. They just study the theory of magic. And these two magicians are kind of aiming to bring magic back. And there's this competitive element between them. The two characters, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, are very different in their approaches to magic. And the amazing thing about this book is the way that it's written. It's written like a nonfiction historical text almost. And my copy is a mess. Look at that spine. So there are all these footnotes that reference other imaginary historical texts, and I just thought that that was incredible. Really well done. Again, super long, but really engaging. The characters are absolutely amazing. This is another one that focuses a lot on character, but it is plot-driven as well. It achieves kind of a very nice balance between the two. And I think that this is an excellent place to start. This is kind of the book that got me back into reading more fantasy. And the last book I have to talk about is a recent read for me. I actually just finished it this month, and that is The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. This is a fantasy classic. It was made into a much-loved movie, which I haven't watched yet, but I will someday. And it sounds really cheesy when you talk about the premise of this book. It's about a unicorn who one day she's in a forest and overhears these men talking about how all the unicorns are gone. And she wonders if she's the last unicorn, so she goes on a quest to find what happened to the other unicorns. Again, it sounds really cheesy, but this book is absolutely stunning. It is so wonderfully written. The world in which it's set is very cool, and I loved all of the characters. They were absolutely amazing. Again, this isn't super plot driven, so again, it focuses a lot on the characters, and it was really good. I almost cried a couple of times, so there's that. So I would highly recommend this as well. So those are all the recommendations I have for you today. If you have any recommendations of fantasy that you think is kind of literary in nature, that's such a weird word to use. I don't like it. Anyway, if you have any recommendations that kind of go along with the vibes of this video, please let me know in the comments. If you have any questions about these books, I'd be happy to answer them, and I will see you all tomorrow.